Each one of them also comes with baggage. They all have at least one thing that brings them down from more than greatness for most people. Oh, what's that I hear? Number 37, Final Fantasy Tactics. I tried to warn you.
Justice for Tactics. Good list, though I disagree with some placements. Tactics is way better than 7, 8, 9, and 10. But also Lightning Returns is peak. Crummy list. Tactics is way too low. P.S. You're dumb for not liking Tactics. Final Fantasy Tactics is probably the greatest game of all times, lol. Def the greatest FF game, easy. I yelled out loud when you said the placement of the original FF Tactics. The way I covered my mouth at the OG Tactics being ranked 37 like a horrifying movie twist. Final Fantasy Tactics is perfect in every way, thank you. He puts Final Fantasy Tactics at 37 and 13-2 at 6 and Lightning Returns at 4. Saved you wasting your time on this piece of trash list. Tactics, 37. It's really a shame how people with this bad of taste are allowed to openly express their opinions. Where is Tactics? Less than number 1? Farewell! Tactics is being remade, so yeah, no more number 37. Welcome to my review of Final Fantasy Tactics. Again. When you're ranking 67 games, the 37th one is usually not a big deal. It's literally mid-tier. Actually, it's a little less than mid, as in, when compared to every single game in the series, it is more commonly worse than it is better. Mathematically, it is worse than 55% of Final Fantasy media. This is a description you might expect for games like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: The Crystal Bearers, Final Fantasy XII: Revenant Wings, Final Fantasy Adventure, or even Final Fantasy: The Four Heroes of Light. Games that just don't mean much to most people. Generally okay games, but not games you'd especially recommend. Maybe they were fun, but you don't plan on replaying them anytime soon, and you might just forget about them. I got barely a few comments on any of those games I just listed, as you might expect for the mid-tier, but each of those games were neighboring the 37th spot, where I happened to place one of the most celebrated and adored games in the series. It was indeed Final Fantasy Tactics. The comment section was kept in a stranglehold for this. You won't be scrolling for very long on that video before encountering one of these angry fans calling me out for such a horrible take. There was a lot of hate spouted for where I placed Final Fantasy IX as well, but it didn't come close to this. The Tactics fans came out as if a nuke went off in their hometown. They witnessed the unimaginable. Someone called their GOAT mid. I wasn't completely alone, though. For every, 7 hate comments, there was one happy comment talking about, finally someone feels the same way I do. I find it hard to believe that the narrative online is so heavily in favor of glazing Tactics, maybe more so than any of these other games, which is so crazy because arguing about which Final Fantasy is best has been a core part of this community since forever. Like, Final Fantasy VII is talked about more than any of them, obviously, and it's glazed all the time, but you're always gonna find some people out there calling it overhyped. Plenty of them. With Tactics, anywhere I go is gonna have people calling it one of the best games ever made. Not even best Final Fantasy games, just games, period. Why is that? I do have a theory. See, when I started going through the archives, playing each of these games in release order, Tactics was something I thought would be my first roadblock. There are some games you look at and think, ooh boy, that's not gonna be for me. Coupled with its reputation of being difficult and unforgiving, I never expected to love the game at all. And surprise, surprise, I did not. Reviewing every Final Fantasy Season 1 Episode 14 was my first review of Final Fantasy Tactics. I played the War of the Lions remake since it was the newest version at the time, and I played it on the iPhone since it was the most accessible version at the time. Yeah, I know, as many of you pointed out, playing a game like this on the iPhone does kind of suck, but the convenience was worth it. If anyone thought I put it at number 37 because of the touchscreen controls, rest assured that was not a factor in the decision. You can watch that episode of Ref Void to see for sure. It's a bit of a rough one though. Back in the day, these reviews were way less structured, and if a game frustrated me enough, most of the video would just be a rant about all my problems with it. I'm never replaying this game again, I'm sorry. But even back then, I got a couple comments saying I had the same experience as you, or this video confirmed my fears about ever playing the game. And that's where my theory comes in. This is one of those games you see gameplay of in a showcase and you either get excited about it or your brain turns off because you know you'll never have fun with a game like that. I think the reason Tactics is so overhyped is because most of the people who wouldn't enjoy it will simply never play it because they know they won't enjoy it. So it creates this echo chamber of Tactics lovers talking with other Tactics lovers. Let's be honest, it wears its warning signs on its face. The game looks demanding, grindy, and technical. To some people, that's great. That's what you want. But to others, that's an absolutely do not engage. The same thing should go for Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem is an ongoing series now with a ton of different entries, and of course, it doesn't help that the people who don't enjoy that type of game still have to deal with their Smash Bros. Roster slots being taken up by it. So yeah, Fire Emblem gets plenty of hate, but Tactics, that's just one game from the 90s. Yeah, sure, we got a couple sequels that don't match the original, but they're pretty much never in the conversation. The average guy who wouldn't enjoy Tactics has no reason to ever think about or engage in a discussion surrounding Tactics. Until you decide to play through every game in the series with no exception for a show where you engage in a discussion surrounding each of them. It's me, average guy. This is what happens when you play a game you know you're not gonna love. Who would have thought? Flash forward to 2025, I'm done with my quest, and I've made the big 5-hour ranking video. After considering each entry and how they make me feel, now that time has passed, Tactics ends up at number 37, with a promise that I might replay it if it ever got a remake.
Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load of... Somebody wants...
2 days. 2 days after the ranking video went public, the Ivalice Chronicles was announced. These last few months have gone by in a blink. A lot of people were curious about how this new version would change my opinion on things. So that's what we're here to find out. Is this version gonna bring up the game in a few places? It's possible. So why don't we start by going over what's new here? What changed in the Ivalice Chronicles? It's a lot of a little. Small touches here and there, a little quality of life, balancing changes, dialogue changes. If you're an outsider to the game and you're wondering what makes this version a big deal, the answer is nothing much. I would call this a remaster, not a remake. It feels similar to the pixel remasters of the first 6 mainlines that came out a few years back. A fresh coat of paint for the modern audience. It also keeps up the frustrating tradition of those remasters by not including extra content that was added in previous versions. The War of the Lions remake from the PSP had additional guest characters like Balthier from 12 and Luso from Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift, as well as full cutscenes for certain important parts of the story and a couple new jobs. All of that is gone. I don't know what's up with Square Enix being so afraid to make a definitive version of any of their damn games. And they gave the same reasoning as they did for the Pixel remasters. They're always talking about preserving the identity of the original, but we always find something that contradicts their idea of preservation. For instance, the script was re-edited for like the 4th time, but they used the War of the Lions script as the baseline for it, not the original. Now, this is because most people agree the War of the Lions script was better, especially because the original got details downright incorrect or left out completely in the translation. But still, you're not preserving the original, are you? A cool thing about the Ivalice Chronicles is that they included the original game in its entirety. You can just play that one with none of the quality of life improvements if you so choose. That is just a straight emulation of the PS1. So then, wouldn't this give you an excuse to add whatever you wanted to the enhanced version? Anyone who has a problem with new stuff has the original right there. But what's really funny is that they actually did change one thing about the classic version we have here. They used the War of the Lions script. Everything about the original is preserved, except the entire script. So, I don't know what that means for preservation. I think this confirms that Square Enix considers the original script to be a failure, at least in some way. Enough for them to remove even the option to view it in a direct port. If you want to get technical about it, they effectively gave us two versions of tactics, neither of which truly preserve the identity of the original. I know most people don't care about the original script, but they did the same thing with the scripts of the Pixel remasters, and those didn't even include the original versions to play. My whole point is, just keep the stuff you already added. 18 years ago, man. War of the Lions is 18 years old, and we don't have the stuff from that version. Come on. I particularly miss the cutscenes, because they do give us a brand new remake of the opening in Ivalice Chronicles, and it's beautiful. I would have loved to see a few more, but that's all we got. The lack of add-on content is probably the worst part about the Ivalice Chronicles. I'm happy to say the rest is pretty good stuff. Best of all, the game is now fully voiced. Whether it's the story, a side quest, battle dialogue, or just the merchant asking you what you want. Every line is spoken. If you want it to be, you do have the option to turn it off. As someone who struggled to get into the story very much the first time I played, this helped quite a lot. The voice acting is stellar. There's one minor character who joins you for like 3 levels of the game, but they have an emotional dialogue with someone, they have to cry. And this minor character doesn't have a speaking role beyond these few levels, but they still nail that scene. All the actors are giving their all. It's A-list voice acting throughout the whole game. It enhanced the story so much. There are purists out there who are like, meh, it ruins it. I don't know, don't listen to them. I'd go as far to say the voice acting is the best feature of this version. I loved it. And Ben stars in it. This guy won't leave me alone. If I had to choose between having those cutscenes from War of the Lions or having full voice acting, I would actually choose the full voice acting. But it could have been cool if we had both. There's a new graphical style, as you can see. It's going for a more smoothed out look as opposed to the jagged pixels of the last version. It looked a bit fuzzy on the PS1, but the War of the Lions remake made it sharp and crispy. I think what Ivalice Chronicles is trying to do is make it look closer to a 4K version of the original. They don't want you seeing the pixel edges anymore. Not everyone's a fan of this. It doesn't personally bother me either way. What makes the new version definitively better is in the realistic lighting effects. That looks really pretty, but yeah, it's not everyone's cup of tea. If you're one of those people who hates how the HD 2D games look, I have a feeling you'll have some problems with this one too. The UI is all shiny and new. Can you tell the Final Fantasy XVI team worked on it? It hits you as soon as a tutorial screen pops up. The question mark with the line through it that opens to teach you a new thing is directly taken from 16, as is the state of the realm. Just like in 16, you can view a map of the world and skip through the timeline to look at everything that's happened during your journey, who was involved with what, and where everyone was at the time. There's a whole new Chronicles section where you can find this. It's all right out of 16, with character bios, a glossary, just about any information you could want about Ivalice. You know what I'm missing though? Active time lore. Of all these story features, I thought that was the best one. Basically, you could pause the game at any time and view definitions for characters, environments, and current events that were relevant in that cutscene. And they would all be changed to match what was going on. It was really thorough and helpful. It's like the one thing they didn't bring over from 16, sadly. Seems like it was a lot of work for something that probably went underappreciated. Well, you know what, Yoshi P? I appreciated it. The only other somewhat major new addition is this extra guest character dialogue that occurs in some battles. You might be fighting a boss with Agrias on your team and they'll call her out specifically, insulting and adding more heat to the fight while providing some backstory you might not have known about. That's really neat, although it encourages you to not bring along your own custom characters in fear of missing some of that extra context. Now let's talk about quality of life. This is what I was most excited about going in because, as I've said before, Tactics has issues. It does, guys. Y'all gotta stop pretending it doesn't. You gotta stop pretending that this isn't a crusty old stubborn PS1 game. Even War of the Lions didn't change much about that. There's one simple thing that completely, fundamentally improved the entire gameplay experience. You can now undo movement. Oh, thank the Lord. In the original and War of the Lions, if you moved a character, you had to fully commit. Even if you didn't know what that unit was able to do in his new position, that's too bad. He's there now. Oh, it turns out he's got an accuracy of 10% in this spot, or actually due to the awkward terrain, you can't even aim at that enemy from here. Now your unit is in range of the enemy, but unable to even retaliate. He's basically dead now, and you might just be losing the fight because of that. All because you moved them, and the game didn't let you just press B to go back because you weren't sure. It might sound like I'm exaggerating, but that is how particular and aggressive this game can be. And if you're not familiar with this genre, being able to undo movement is not an extraordinary concept. It's basically in all of these games. It's part of how you strategize. You move a unit in range to check if their attack would be worth putting them there at all. You don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the game's nuances to be able to tell without moving them. That's just how it works. What am I strategizing if I don't have any of that information? I'm just sending someone in and hoping. Well, I don't need to keep ranting about it because it is fixed now. It just makes so much more sense. You can't undo attacks. That would be too far. There's a randomness to your accuracy and damage, so to let you undo an attack would just be cheating. But letting you undo movement, it just should be part of these games. Like letting you flee from wild battles. You want that in every RPG, but you really want it in this one. Random wild battles don't just consist of a couple goblins that you burn through in a few hits. They're full tactical fights that could take you up to like 20 minutes every time. Neither of the previous versions allowed you to flee from wild battles. It was torture. When running around on the map, there was a chance that any one of these dots could end up forcing you into a fight. If you needed to run across the world to get a specific shop that had something you needed, or pick up a squad you sent on an errand, or to advance a side quest, I hope you set aside about an hour because it could potentially take that long. This is apparently the greatest Final Fantasy game ever. Well, no longer do you have to put up with that. In Ivalice Chronicles, every wild battle gives you the option to participate or just skip it. No more worrying about setting aside so much time just to pick something up, or trying to plan ahead by stocking up on everything just so you wouldn't have to come back later. It is so much better. The only potential downside is missing out on XP and JP from those fights, if you were originally expected to play them. I was responsible. I basically only skipped these fights if I was doing any of those small quick jobs I mentioned, not if I was traveling to a new area for the story. Less time wasted is always good. And on that topic, a speed up option was added to battles. Those 20-minute fights I was talking about could be reduced to 10 or 15 minutes depending on how liberally you used this. It can be used at any time and speeds up any action. I believe it's 2 times speed. You can't toggle it though. You gotta hold it down. That's annoying, but it doesn't matter. It was much appreciated. Especially in those stretches where like 5 enemies take their turn before you and you just gotta sit there and watch. It'll speed up dialogue too, so you do have to be careful. Weirdly, there's no option to skip cutscenes. And by cutscenes I mean the extensive exchange of words often delivered before battle begins. When you're retrying a fight, you don't want to hear all that again, but you can't skip it. It's not a big deal, fast forwarding is fine, but it would have been nice. The Ivalice Chronicles surprisingly marks the first time Final Fantasy Tactics has ever been officially available on PC. I don't know about you, but I was really excited to be able to control the game using a mouse. You do a lot of pointing and clicking in this genre. I figured it would be perfect. In some ways, using the touch controls back on the iPhone were actually good. Unfortunately, I found out the touch controls were perhaps better than the mouse controls. They feel a little tacked on in this version. Tactical PC games usually allow you to control the camera freely with WASD, while your mouse does just about everything else. What kills mouse control in this game is that you cannot freely move the camera at all. WASD is just used to move the cursor on the grid or menu, just as the D-pad does on controller. You can use the mouse to drag the camera to one of only 4 allowed camera angles, and you can click to move your unit and decide its action, but it just doesn't feel snappy at all. It's obviously designed for a controller, and they didn't bother to go the extra mile to make keyboard and mouse work as nicely as they could have. That was a letdown. They didn't even enable mouse control on Switch 2. And it leads me to a complaint I had about the original that is still here. The Final Fantasy Tactics camera angle is iconic. It is core to the game's visual identity, but it's really not intuitive. You use a straight up, down, left, right input to move a character in a direction that is always at a 45-degree angle difference to any of those. Obviously, this isn't game ruining. I'm not trying to make this out to be a bigger problem than it is. We're just really digging into the details of what bothers me about this game. There's a reason other tactical RPGs don't do this. It's not that it's hard to control, it just doesn't feel good. Like when there's a bridge that makes two different spaces on the same vertical line. If I move the cursor over there, which of the two spots is it gonna highlight? I don't really know. It seems like it changes its mind every time. What if I literally can't see where I'm trying to go? Look at this. Every angle blocks my view because I can only look at it two ways. Now they added tactical view in an attempt to solve this. Hold the button down to get a bird's eye view, which clears the situation up sometimes. It's still a little awkward and not a perfect solution. When you're in this view, you can't even select or execute commands. I was just really hoping we could rotate the camera freely instead of being confined to the 4 points. Yeah, it might look a little weird, but who cares? We can already see it during the brief rotation animation. What's the big deal? Feels like it wouldn't even be hard to mod in. Oh, and the way the camera forces control out of my hands whenever an enemy takes a turn is so annoying. But back to improvements. Some jobs were tweaked to add more commands, allegedly. I don't remember enough to see what was new, but I'll take their word for it. What I did notice was the new job description screen, making it more informative on what each job is kinda meant to be used for. And you can now see what you're required to do to unlock jobs. They just didn't tell you in the original. Again, this was a perfect 10 out of 10 game. They added the combat timeline on the left side here. You used to have to pause the game in order to open this up, and it was all just text, so it wasn't nearly as easy to figure out what was going on. Now, it's all there at a glance. You can scroll up to see far in the future, you can ensure whatever spell you're trying to cast is actually gonna hit, and they make it clear when another unit is going to cast their spell. This is a very nice change. At the start of every battle in the original, you had to set the formation of your party. It bothered the heck out of me because you couldn't see the actual battlefield. Just this floating platform. Like, what am I meant to be thinking about when I put a character on that square versus any other square? There is no point of reference for literally anything except the direction we're facing. In this version, you actually get to see the map. Wow. It's still not a huge deal where you decide to place your units, but at least it's not utterly pointless now. Although, don't bother thinking about where to put Ramza. The game always moves him wherever the hell it wants for story purposes. I don't know why it even lets you place him at all. Seriously, almost every time, wherever you put him, the game's like, no, actually he's here. Okay, screw you too. There is now an auto battle feature. This is a little wild. You can set units individually to auto battle, and you could tell them to focus on specific units or just move to this area far away that's gonna take a couple turns or whatever you want. I tried this out once, but I felt like, what am I doing if I'm just gonna auto battle? I'd rather control the units myself, so I didn't really experiment with this much. There are a few instances where I think this would be useful, but like, I don't know, it's there. It's something. There's also an auto save feature. The game auto saves every turn and holds up to 3 saves at once. This is kind of wild because it's basically built-in save scumming. Remember how I said earlier it would be cheating if the game let you undo your attack after it was performed? Well, if you load the last autosave, you can do just that. I didn't even realize this was a thing until about halfway through the game, but I never wanted to resort to save scumming. My whole goal with this playthrough was to give it another solid chance, not cheat through it. At least until I got Sid. Which brings me to the last notable addition, difficulty options. As a way to appeal to newcomers afraid of this game's reputation, and to hardcore fans looking for a new challenge, they added an easier Squire mode and a harder Tactician mode to Ivalice Chronicles. Now, regardless of all these changes we've talked about, I knew deep down that this would still be the same frustrating experience. I wanted to take the most frustration out of the game as I could in an effort to see if I like it that much better. I chose to play on Squire mode. I have nothing to prove to you people. If you're gonna call me bad, go ahead. I'm doing this for you. I'm trying to understand why this game is so good. Currently, the main reason why I don't, in a nutshell, is for how grindy, slow, and time-consuming it is. If playing on Squire makes all that better, I will like it better. And hey, War of the Lions is generally regarded as even more difficult than the original, and I beat that, so I've done my time. Again, nothing to prove here. But okay, what exactly makes Squire mode easier? The game only gives you a single sentence explanation, as most games do. Night mode is carefully balanced, Squire mode features easier battles, and Tactician mode offers a greater challenge. You gotta research yourself to get the actual information. According to what I've found, which is mostly from anecdotal posts online from so-called data miners, Tactician reduces all your damage that you deliver pretty flatly by 30%, and it increases enemy damage to you by 20%, as well as boosting stats of all enemies the farther you go in. Squire mode increases your damage to enemies by 10% and allegedly decreases enemy damage to you by 50%. From my experience, I can sort of believe that. Increasing my damage by 10% is negligible, hardly even worth talking about. 50% decrease in damage received sounds more impactful than it felt when I played. My characters would die in 2 to 3 hits most of the time, so according to this, on night mode they would be dying in 1 to 2 hits instead. I guess I can buy that. But then on Tactician mode, it would also take about 1 to 2 hits. Not much of a difference there after all. And according to what I've heard, most of the game doesn't feel so different on Tactician mode outside of the difficulty spikes being just a little bit more spiky. The only thing I can tell you with confidence is how I felt playing what I played, and Squire mode honestly did not feel terribly different from my last playthrough in terms of difficulty. The majority of differences I noticed were from the game's quality of life boosts and general gameplay balances, not the direct damage values. Yes, sadly, tactics is still tactics. It still wanted me to grind a lot, it was still slow, and the difficulty curve was still all over the place, just like we remember. I'm sure Squire mode reduces all that to an extent, but you definitely still feel it. So I'd say if you're one of those outsiders who think you probably wouldn't like this game but are tempted because of how much it's praised, and you're hoping the easy mode will help it go more smoothly, take it from me, I don't think the difference is enough to sway anyone's opinion. It did not sway mine. Oops, just spoiled the video. To sum up the remaster, it is indeed a lot of a little. They wanted it to feel like the same game but smoother, and I think they succeeded. I took these changes for granted pretty quickly because it wasn't until I sat down to make this video that I realized some of these features weren't there when I first played. In my defense, it was 4 years ago. If I went back now, I would probably be amazed at what I couldn't do in that old version. Those old ones are rougher than I remembered, and I remembered them being pretty rough. I think they could have gone even farther with it, and $50 is a bit much to ask, but overall, this is a good remaster. It is smoother in many ways, a lot of stupid, pointless hardships were removed, it's balanced a little better, the script is mostly better, and the voice acting is extremely good. But under the surface, it's still Final Fantasy Tactics. Most of the biggest problems I had with the original game are still here. So for the rest of the video, I will be going into why I ranked it at number 37. Now that I have the entire Final Fantasy canon under my belt, and I'm able to experience this again with new eyes, I want to talk about the Tactics experience in more detail than I ever have before. My original 25-minute review understandably left much to be desired, and my short follow-up in the big ranking video didn't help much either, so I want to start by discussing and clearing up a few things from back then. I've rewatched the original review. It was mostly a big rant about things I found unnecessarily brutal about the game, some of which were fixed as we talked about already. Something it has in common with my ranking video is how I dig into the Zodiac system. If you don't know, every unit in the game has a zodiac sign, and it affects how they might interact with each other. An actual compatibility chart can show you how your unit might have low accuracy or deal less damage to another. It bothered me so much because you had no way of knowing what zodiac signs you'd be up against until it was too late. And even if you did, you're not going to have a backup of other well-trained units with different signs. You're probably just going to deal with the consequences and try to force through it. So it didn't change how I played. It was just another bother I didn't think about until, oops, this attack's accuracy is 12. I guess it's not gonna hit. Oh well. But there were a good amount of comments that called me out for overblowing the Zodiac system's influence on everything. They said it's not actually that big a deal. It's not important enough to be like the main thing I talk about in that section. And after playing through it again, I agree. I will concede on this point. Now the thing is, I don't know if it's just because the remaster tweaked it or if I was wrong in the first place. All I know is on this playthrough, I didn't think about the zodiac signs almost at all. It definitely made small differences here and there, but certainly not as big as I made it sound. At least not anymore. I just do remember a lot of my attacks having super low accuracy the first time around, especially ranged magic attacks. So if it wasn't the zodiac system, I don't know what the heck it was. The reason I highlighted it in the ranking video was because regardless of how influential it is, it still sums up my feelings on the game as a whole. This is a system you have no control over, but it affects how you play, and it's pretty much all luck. So when people tell me, nah, you don't have to worry about it, it's not that important, I'm like, okay, so then why is it there? What does it add? And that is a point I make about this game a lot. So many parts of tactics feel like that. Like this other mechanic I brought up in the original review, bravery and faith. Each unit has a value for bravery and faith. It affects a few things, subtly, damage, accuracy, and more. It barely changes on its own, mostly from enemy abilities, and eventually you unlock a job with abilities that affect it. Well, you also might not. If bravery ever gets too low on a unit, they will permanently leave your party. If faith gets too high, they'll do the same thing, erasing all grinding and progress made with that character. This is never directly explained to you, not even in the new version. This is probably because the likelihood of it happening to you is very low unless you go messing with the stats yourself too heavily. It's a thing that most people online will once again tell you is not a big deal, don't worry about it. And again, I ask, what is the point then? This stat can actually greatly affect the usefulness of a unit. Like, a white mage will heal more with a higher faith, but playing for the first time, you'll spend the whole game not even knowing it's a thing. A lot of frustrations come with just being uninformed about how the game works. Fans will say you might not like tactics nearly as much until your second playthrough because by then, you'll know some things you wish you knew at the beginning. They kinda shrug it off like that's normal. It's not normal. If the game can't be bothered to efficiently communicate what it wants from you, that is an objectively bad thing. The more difficult and demanding a game is, the more important the teaching process is. Some games are simple enough to get away with the teaching method just being try and try again. That's the Dark Souls method. Those games pretty much never stop you to explain anything. And yes, you're better off with an understanding of the deeper RPG mechanics, but it's not required. If you want to just pick up a big sword and keep throwing yourself at a boss, you can do that and eventually you'll win. In other Final Fantasy RPGs, if your strategy isn't working on a boss, you usually have to look at your toolkit and reconfigure it until it does work. They usually give you a bunch of options to choose from, but in tactics, you never really have many other options, especially on your first go, because the amount of preparation it asks of you is unreasonably high. There are so many ways to prepare, and you could spend hours preparing one way, and you'll encounter a fight that demands you should have prepared a different way. How was I supposed to know? It's good to keep your avenues open, right? You want to train anything you can in case you need it later. In Final Fantasy VII, it's as simple as equipping your materia. In 9, it's just about swapping your armor and weapons out when you find new ones. In 5, or most any other job system game, it's just about changing jobs when you're done getting the abilities you wanted. If you approach the tactics job system with that same attitude, it will kick your ass. There is so much more to know than just managing the different jobs you have. It infamously has a thick instruction book's worth of tutorial text that's available to sift through on the main menu. Another major complaint I had in my first video. I did my due diligence and I read through it all before starting, but that didn't change the fact that this is the worst way to teach your player how to play. I mean, it's scientifically proven. Info dumping on someone is just a bad way to teach. And that old tutorial still didn't tell you everything. Ivalice Chronicles has modern gaming tutorial pop-ups to ease the player in a little more nicely. It does work better, but it only covers the basics. They still ask you to read up on everything in the new Chronicle menu to figure the rest out. But the real reason you can't approach the tactics job system the same way you approached most others like 5 is because it simply just takes so long to accomplish the same thing. This video is very ranty, I know, and I'm complaining about a lot of different things, but if I can emphasize one thing most, if I can boil my frustrations down and target one aspect to communicate my anger, it would be this. It just takes an unreasonable amount of time to do anything. As someone who's played every Final Fantasy game, I can say with confidence this is the slowest character building system in the entire series by a massive margin. Mostly because progression is tied to an individual's action. If a unit has a slower speed than the rest of you, they will have fewer turns, fewer opportunities to gain XP and JP. If they have a lower movement stat, they'll take longer to get to where they need to be to perform their action to gain XP and JP. If they miss their attack or spell or whatever, they won't gain any XP or JP either way. You can fight an entire battle and gain almost nothing at the end. And you'll pay for it later in the game when you need a more advanced team to overcome a difficult boss. You can try to make it go faster by grinding Squire with every unit and teaching them JP boost. You can have your slow units hit your own teammates just to get an attack in to earn credit, but these are the kinds of things you're not gonna know the first time around. Hitting my own teammates, why would I ever do that? Oh, because the game is a massive grind and that helps a little. There are people who will seriously tell you that Final Fantasy Tactics is an easy game. Oh, I bulldozed through it on tactician mode, you're just bad. These are people who have played it multiple times and probably grind their units heavily until they get the jobs and abilities they want. Yeah, you can do that in like any game, but it's incredibly boring. You can spend hours and hours and hours mindlessly grinding, but if you don't want to do that, there's zero chance you'll get to the end with a satisfying, complete, customized team. There is just not enough game to get all your units to that point. You won't even unlock all the jobs by the end. I'm thinking about Final Fantasy V, like the way my team was so synergized with each other. I had all the jobs I could want. I was playing with any abilities that I needed, and it all culminates in like this final boss where everything goes how I need it to go, and it's so fun and satisfying, and Tactics is just like, by the end of the game, I'm wondering what the heck I even did. This all tells me that the game was designed with wasting the player's time in mind. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't connect in my head why they would make it that way, or why people would enjoy it that way. Unless you're just a guy who loves to see numbers go up no matter how slowly they do. I imagine a version of this game where you earn JP exceedingly faster, and it sounds exceedingly better. Imagine the freedom of mashing up all the job abilities you could want together without a painful grind. Is that not just better? No, it would be too much fun for Tactics. So yeah, nothing much has changed in 4 years, has it? I still just don't get this game. But the last major takeaway from that old video is how I barely even brought up the story. My honest reason is that I was so distracted by the trouble the rest of the game was giving me that I truly just didn't care. It all went in one ear and out the other. I've always claimed to be a gameplay-focused player. If I become disengaged with the mechanics of the actual game, the story will not bring me back in. It doesn't matter how good it is. But this time around, I made more of an effort to be mentally present for the story because I wanted to actually talk about it this time. There are some Tactics fans who might actually agree with me in a few areas regarding the frustrating gameplay, but they'll excuse it for the amazing story. So, let's see how amazing that story is. Ramza Beowulf, son of Barbaneth Beowulf, was a loyal apprentice to the house. He grew up with a commoner named Delita Hyrule, as they both trained to become knights. The story begins fresh off the back of the so-called 50 Years' War in which Barbaneth commanded the Order of the Northern Sky on the side of Ivalice. Ivalice did not win this war. The game's story revolves around a new civil war that unfolds after the death of Barbaneth, leaving his 3 sons to fight about what to do next. Around the same time, the ruler of Ivalice, King Ondoria, also died suddenly with no chosen heir. With only an adopted daughter, Princess Ovelia, unfit to rule, there needed to be a regent temporary ruler who would likely be on the throne for quite a while. Thus, the regions of Ivalice all try to fight and scheme their way onto the throne in what ends up being called the War of the Lions, later used as the subtitle for the PSP remake of the game. Ramza and Delita at first are both on orders to eliminate the Corpse Brigade, a group of thieves who rose up after they served in the previous war but ended up returning home without pay. Ramza and Delita are not blind to the injustices of the Corpse Brigade's plight, and this becomes a major theme throughout the story, but one way or another, they both end up being major players in the War of the Lions with different motivations and different strategies. Delita is kind of a Riku to Ramza's Sora, in simple terms. Ramza tries all he can to do things the peaceful and righteous way. He just wants everyone to stop fighting. But Delita doesn't have his patience. He starts playing like the rest of the snakes of Ivalice, doing whatever it takes to get closer to the top without regard for the lives of others, much less his friendship with Ramza. And in the middle of this war comes the unveiling of ancient relics called the Zodiac Stones. Once thought of as myths, they were known to contain powers unseen. That's all the inciting plot to this grand chess game of political conflict. There are many other players, surprises, changes to the game, and side quest stories to sink your teeth into if you would enjoy this world and its rich history. I just can't tell you more without spoiling some of those surprises. I'll warn you before we get into spoiler territory, but I will give my general thoughts right now. Some people have been waiting to hear my thoughts on the story for years since I was so careless to even barely bring it up the first time around. I hate to cause more disappointment than I already am with this video, but I'm sure if you made it this far, you can handle a little more. The story is good. Don't worry, I'm not gonna bash it. It's good. But I don't have a lot to say about it. I honestly tried forcing this section of the video to be longer, to sort of do the story justice, but it was just bloat. My videos are long, but I don't want to indulge or make filler content just to make the scope seem grander. All I want is to give my honest feelings, and sometimes that means going into deep detail, other times I just don't care enough. This story, like so much of the game, is not one that connects with me that deeply. I love how mature it is. I love the writing, the language, the way everyone speaks. And as I said, the voice acting elevates it so much farther for me. I was surprised how into it I was in the first 2 chapters. I was on board with Ramza and I was following the plots of the various bad guys too. Sometime in chapter 3 though, I just started to fall off. There are so many moving pieces to this chess game and they pretty much never stop introducing new characters, some of whom are only relevant for a quick section and then they go away forever. There are only 4 chapters, but each one is longer than the last, with chapter 4 being almost as long as the first 3 combined. The new Ivalice Chronicles script goes pretty far in making all these interconnected storylines less confusing, but over time, it just starts to get kinda dry. Like once you definitively find out who is pure evil, the story becomes chasing after them while you wait for them to do more evil things. The plot eventually shifts its focus from medieval Game of Thrones political drama to a hunt down all the magic stones quest, which we've seen plenty of. I lost count of how many times you enter a battle with Ramza saying, "Stop this please, we don't have to fight." And then the other guy says, "Oh, I don't care, I want to kill you because I'm mad, and then you kill him. And you move on. There is a clear anti-authoritarian message that we all love to see these days, and it is delivered in a different way than usual, not like any old Final Fantasy where you kill God and God is a metaphor for the abusive elite. No, in this game there is no metaphor. You are against the actual abusive elite, and they will label you a heretic for conflicting with them in any way. They will turn the commoners against you if they consider you a threat, but the only way to beat them is to not give up. To keep fighting for what you know is right, even when the world surrounds you with liars and gluttons who only want power to control you. It is a relevant message for today, and I love that message. That's what I'm talking about when I say the story is mature. I just think it gets a little muddled when the magic superstones become the main focus. That's when it becomes more like the Final Fantasy story we know. And it's not even that bad of a thing. Many will still find it intriguing all the way through, but I just get a little bored. There are plenty of other stories in this franchise I enjoy so much more. Part of that, I know, is due to a lack of memorable characters. I'm the type of guy that responds and relates more enthusiastically to character-based stories, especially when it comes to an RPG I'm gonna spend tens of hours playing. I would like to feel like I've gone on a great journey with this crew of people I got to know more personally through that journey. That's like my favorite part of any RPG story. That's one reason why you won't find Final Fantasy XII that high on my list either. The characters just don't do much for me. Actually, all the Ivalice games are like that. Ramza is a fine protagonist, but sort of a goody two-shoes. He's so honorable, he does the right thing every time. Sometimes he struggles, but his intentions are always perfect. He never wants to fight, even though he fights every time. He's a good guy, but like, what else can you say about him? He's a good guy. Yeah, Ramza. Delita, though, is probably the best character in the game. He definitely does not do the right thing. You understand why he doesn't do the right thing, you know what he's fighting for, and can relate to his struggle. Delita came from nothing and just had more taken away from him. He's understandably bloodthirsty. Whenever a scene with Delita showed up, I was sitting up in my seat, thoroughly interested in where his story was going from beginning to end. But, he's not a party member. Your only constant party member is Ramza. Many guest characters can be recruited to your squad, much more than can even fit on a team. But once they do, that officially marks the end of their story. At first, these characters are required to fight alongside you, and you can't even control them. They stay with you for a handful of battles until they get wherever they need to be. From that point on, when you recruit them, you can now control them, gain access to their unique abilities, and train them in any job you want, but they are no longer active participants in the story. The Ivalice Chronicles has new secret battle dialogue depending on who you bring, which helps the situation and is a great feature, but it doesn't change their irrelevancy that much. There are no moments where the party steps back and checks in with each other, no campfires, no personal conversations. You can't get to know these people at all. The writers had no choice but to eliminate them from the story proper because the game has permadeath. The player needed to be able to lose them forever without it ruining the story. Another reason why permadeath is a mechanic I hate. We'll get to that later. So yeah, I like Agrius, I like Mustadio. You know I like Cid, but you never really get to know them. Even in Final Fantasy XVI, with its lack of a party, had a handful of characters I loved and were considered honorably part of the team. For me, the story is just good. I have a few more things to say that involve spoilers, so I'm activating ATS here. That stands for Active Time Spoil. I'll be discussing spoilers for the rest of this chapter of the video, so this shield will be up in the corner. Skip to the next chapter on battles if you don't want to hear it. Timestamps are in the description. Alright, a note about the Zodiac Stone plotline. The big twist is that each stone is connected to a Lucavi, which is a race of demons who invade Ivalice when a stone is used by possessing the human host who used it. I knew it was coming this time, but on my first playthrough this was a genuine surprise and a great moment. The designs are all so gross and uniquely creepy. There aren't many monsters in the series that look like them. You watch almost every major antagonist succumb to their desire for power by giving their life to these demons. You can imagine why this starts to distract from the political conflict that was going on before. The goal of the Lucavi is to resurrect basically their god, Ultima, who will allow them all to roam free without the need for vessels. They're going to do it through a secret portal hidden in the Orban Monastery, so whether it's the church or the state, everyone's evil. Who even cares who becomes king at this point? The world is gonna end, there are demons running around. This kinda removes the human element that was there during the rest of the story. We used to be fighting over greed and power, very relatable and common human vices that reflect our world at any period of time. But then the main antagonists become literal demons, unholy abominations from a different dimension whose motivations kinda sum up to because they're evil. Do they want to take over the world? Do they want to kill everyone? I don't know if they ever explicitly say. They're just demons. They're bad because they're bad. We gotta stop them because they're demons. So we do. Now the ending of the whole game is really great. I do love where they leave everything off. While you were busy with the demons, Delita's master plan went through pretty smoothly. He ends up marrying Princess Ovelia after manipulating her and becomes the winner of the War of the Lions. All hail King Delita. He becomes known as a hero, brings a peaceful rule to Ivalice, and lives the rest of his life as one which he swore to destroy. Ramza's name was gone from public record, and he wasn't seen again since the explosion that ended Ultima, assumed dead. In the original, I think it's a little bit more left open to interpretation on whether or not he died or if he just went into hiding, since a friend, Oren, believed he saw him and his sister riding a chocobo one day. But it might have just been a hallucination. He tried to publish historical papers to make Ramza's legacy known, but he was executed for this heretical idea. A generation later, Oren's descendant rediscovered them and finally corrected history. In the Ivalice Chronicles, they make it clear that Ramza and his sister escaped the explosion, somehow using the power of the stones or something. So they are alive, we just don't know what they got up to after that. To be honest, I never realized it was up for interpretation. I always assumed they lived anyway, so this isn't a change that bothered me. Lastly, however many years later, Delita's wife surprises him with a dagger to the chest after coming to terms with the fact that she was just another pawn used for his quest to power. In his final moments, he's left to wonder, was it all worth it? No, we tried to tell you that many times. And this story gets somewhat retold by a playwright in Eorzea during the events of Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood, but we don't need to get into that right now. There are a few side quests that expand upon the lore of Ivalice, but I only had my eyes on one. I was so sad to have missed out on the famous Cloud Strife questline when I first played, so I made sure to do it this time. I found out though that much of this side quest story has absolutely nothing to do with Cloud. It's kind of weird that he's involved at all. It's more involving a dragon and a combat robot that you can recruit to your team, but that was fun. The biggest treat from this quest for me was getting to hear the actual voices of Cody Christian and Brianna White reprising their roles as Cloud and Aerith from the 7 Remake saga. I was excited to see if they were going to try to do an accent to match the world they're in, and Cloud does not.
I have to go. I have to get there. What do you suppose that was all about?
Aerith does though. I guess because this technically isn't Aerith. This is just a flower girl native to Ivalice who happens to look and sound like Aerith. But it's cool to see Brianna adapt her character to this world.
Few are inclined to stop in this squalid rookery, and even fewer buy. It is a harder life than you know. I always dream some charming knight will come galloping through and sweep me away from all this.
Their story doesn't go far beyond this. After saving them from a group of thugs, Cloud officially joins your party in hopes of you helping him get back home. But there's no way to do that. So canonically, I guess it just never happens? Sorry, Cloud. Maybe I had a few years to hype this side quest up, but that was pretty darn anticlimactic. Hey, the fun comes with using Cloud and his exclusive soldier job class with all his unlockable limit breaks. Except, you know, I didn't want to grind for them and the game was coming to a close, so I barely got to see them all, even though I put him on my team for every battle for the rest of the game. I guess that's as good a transition as any. I mean, okay, turns out I had a lot to say about the story after all. Now I finally feel redeemed for that old episode. But yes, it is time to get back to the gameplay. That was a nice break, but I got more complaints for you guys. This is our last topic for Final Fantasy Tactics. I usually don't talk about the turn-taking combat and the character building at the same time, but in this game they are so intertwined that there's no reason to split the discussion up. The way you build, or really how much you build, is the most important factor to how well you perform in combat. Sounds like it makes sense, but what it really means is the more you grind, the easier it will be. If you want to avoid grinding, you may very well screw yourself because you don't have an ability that makes a certain fight 5 times easier. None of the quality of life changes in this new version fix this, not even Squire mode. I do appreciate the real-time tutorials, the undo button, stuff like that, but I have many more problems with the gameplay loop. I've already complained about how long it takes to grind jobs. Experience points hardly matter at all. JP, job points, are everything, and abilities are just so expensive for what they are. If you want to build out a black mage in any other Final Fantasy game, the most you have to do is buy the spells from the shop. Usually by leveling up, you'll just automatically have access to everything a job can do. Not here. Fire, Fyra, Fyraga, Fyraja, Thunder, Thundara, Thundaga, Thundaja, Every element and every tier of that element is a separate JP purchase you have to make before you can use it. And of course, they get progressively more expensive. You're not just gonna have all the Black Mage spells, not without spending most of the game grinding the same job. There's just too many. So you might wonder, which element should you choose? Should you invest in all 3 main elements at tier 1 before going to the higher tiers? Maybe, but what's the difference between the elements? You'd think elemental weakness would come into play, but it barely does. The vast majority of enemies you encounter are just regular old humans, so diversifying your spells barely gives you anything. Humans don't have an elemental weakness, not that the game ever tells you who's weak to what, so you might just try to jump for the highest tier of, say, fire. Okay, so now you'll be nuking people either way, right? No. The difference in damage across the tiers is relatively minor compared to 1, the JP cost to learn it, 2, the MP cost to cast it, sometimes only allowing you 1 or 2 casts for a whole battle, and 3, the cast speed. How long do I have to have my mage sitting there waiting to cast a spell that does like 20 more damage than the one that triggers twice as fast, costing me 3 times less MP? It's really depressing to grind up enough JP to buy an ability and after a few battles realizing you're better off without it. Like, great, I just wasted hours of progress. Maybe you'll try going for something else like poison, get a little damage over time. Then you use it and it takes like 3 turns to do enough damage over time just to match what you can do with a regular fire spell in 1 turn at the same cost. So it's completely useless. Then maybe you go for an instant KO spell like Death or the big nuke flare that costs a whopping 1000 JP points. But these abilities are so low accuracy, you will never reliably get them to work when you need to, and you'll waste your whole MP bar doing it. In other games, you could just bring along ethers to restore MP, but oh, what's that? In Tactics, the unit you use for items doesn't have the ability to give ethers? Because every single usable item you own cannot be used until you buy a separate ability just for that specific character to use that specific item? And you didn't bother to grind that out for ages because there were way more interesting jobs to train than the job that lets you use ethers? Sounds like you're just bad at the game. Now, in the case of Poison, Death, and Flare, this really is not different from your average Final Fantasy game. Poison never seems to do enough damage. Death and Flare are always painfully inaccurate. It's kind of a problem I have with the series as a whole, but it doesn't bother us much in those other games because usually it's just another spell amongst the handful we own. It usually unlocks automatically, or maybe you bought it with the millions of gil you have. If it's not that useful, then whatever. But imagine spending 1000 JP on it just for it to not be good. You could have bought 5 other abilities for that price, and it's just wasted now. Too bad. Would it be so wrong if you could sell back abilities you don't like? That would mitigate the pain a little bit. People call me a baby for not liking this system, but all I want is a game that doesn't relish itself so heavily in wasting my time. I didn't just pick out a few bad examples. There are so many abilities in this game that just don't feel helpful. All that grinding, just for more disappointment. What people love most about the gameplay is the amount of customizability you have over other job system games. Most will let you play as one job and allow you to use abilities you've learned from one other job. This is already fun and satisfying to play with, but Tactics gives you that, and a passive ability, and a reaction ability, and a movement ability, all from any job you want. Well, I should say any job you can. You still need to train all the jobs individually with their own JP banks and buy the corresponding abilities for those slots, which all tend to be much more expensive than the average action ability. Doesn't that just suck the wind out of all that potential a little bit? What if unlocking abilities was simply based on your job level, like the other games? You'd get access to a handful of moves each level. This a la carte purchasing system is just prolonging what would be the same result. Though I guess for people who wanted to skip early abilities, this wouldn't be ideal. All I really want is to be able to gain JP faster. I talk a lot about freedom versus structure in games. I seriously bring it up like every video at this point. RPGs that like to offer a lot of freedom tend to not be designed around specific challenges that the player has to overcome. Instead, it's way more generic. less interesting because the player can do whatever they want and they kind of have to make the fun for themselves. The Tactics fans reference this specifically. They love the fun that they can make for themselves. But I do feel like most of them ignore the grinding and tedium that it takes to get there. That overwrites it for me. I never got to make builds that were too crazy and fun because I found the combat to be too boring to ever want to engage in extra battles outside of the main story or to do any real grinding. But the worst sin a game like this can make is to go against its own design philosophy and actually create fights that do require specific tools to make it through. Specific challenges, actions from the enemy that you have to counter to win. Because if they did that using a system that let players be free to do whatever they want, then certain players would just not have the right tools by chance. And then it sucks. It just sucks really bad. You just get screwed. And that's what happens in Final Fantasy Tactics. Every solution you try to look up, every piece of advice found on a thread online, every guide, every walkthrough for a fight like that, just tells you to use an ability you don't have. The difficulty of this game doesn't come from not being able to outwit your opponent. I truly believe it has a little to do with skill, because there were many instances where I thought, oh, I could counter this guy with this kind of ability, but I don't have it. I just don't have it. So the solution really is to quit the battle and grind for it. I figured out the puzzle. That's kind of like the challenge part. That's like what you play the game for. You figure it out, but you can't solve it. You now have to be punished for not knowing the solution to the puzzle before you even saw the puzzle. It puts an immense pressure on you to choose the correct option for your build. God forbid you equip the wrong ability and have to grind more to pick the one that's actually better, or you pick an ability that is just bad in general, it just doesn't do a lot of damage or barely hits, and you just wasted all that JP. It's especially bad when it comes to chain battles. God, I hate these. Chain battles are a series of battles you must complete in a row. As in, no returning to the overworld map, no stocking up in the shop, and no more grinding. These also happen to be hiding the most difficult fights in the game after one or two other fights. Let's say a boss that uses stone to instantly kill you. Anyone who's played the game probably knows the guy I'm talking about. Back in the original, these fights were famous for potentially soft-locking the player. Again, you couldn't leave a chain of battles, but you could save in between them. If you didn't use more than one slot, it was legitimately possible to end your playthrough. I mentioned this exact thing in the ranking video, sorry for repeating myself, but it is the single worst part about the game. It drives me up a wall. How people could play a game like that and still call it the best in the series, literally calling it flawless. It makes me feel like I was born on a different planet. How are we not all in agreement that this is just bad design? That's what it is. This should be in the textbook for how not to design a boss. Unless the intended audience is masochists, which maybe that's just it. Luckily, the Ivalice Chronicles lets you bail out to the world map, preventing the possibility of soft-locking your game. But the sunk cost fallacy is still there. If you bail on the third fight, you will have to do the first and second fight again. And to top it off, all the JP you earned and any team edits you made between fights will all be erased. If you want to try anything experimental or risky during chain battles, you will pay in time. You can't truly save any progress at all unless you beat them. And it's devastating when you decide to go back. That's why I never did. It forces you to stop experimenting. Just make everyone their strongest job, even if you don't want to train that job any longer. But that's a lot of precious JP wasted on a job that you don't need it for anymore. The way hard fights should go in a game like this is to have the player have to go back to the drawing board, to keep changing things around to see what eventually works. But unless you've been grinding out all the jobs you can, there is no drawing board. Every potential answer to the problem involves leaving to do that heavy grinding. You need this ability. Okay, so I have to fight wild battles for like 30 to 60 minutes to get that power. Also, I have to quit this battle chain, which means all the progress I made, the grinding I just did, the 30 minutes I just spent fighting. all lost and I have to do it over. No, I don't want to. Of course I'm just going to try to make it work with what I have. I don't want everything I just did to be thrown away. This most infamous example, if you didn't know, is a 1v1 fight with Ramza versus the boss. It is the only fight in the game that limits you to one unit, and it has to be Ramza. It's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. All you have to work with is whatever you trained Ramza in. If he's not in a fighting class, he's just done for. You just lose. I made sure he was a fighting class this time. I was prepared. I actually beat him just fine. I was a Dragoon, so I could basically jump in the air, slam down, and do that twice. He was pretty much dead. But he would still get a couple attacks in me, even almost kill me. And yes, this was on Squire mode, but I had a reaction ability called Critical Health Full Heal. So if I got to low health and he didn't kill me, I would get to full HP and I would finish him off on that turn. It was kind of perfect. But then he has a second form. The second phase of a fight is when you have to fight a monster. This time your party is there with you, but the monster can either nuke you or just turn the whole team to stone if he gets bored. There is absolutely nothing you can do to fix Petrify except for a few abilities. I think 2 spells in the game, and then the Golden Needle item ability if you happen to have grinded out your Squire on anybody to use that specific item. Now, if you had the Petrify ability and you used it on an enemy, chances are it would be very low accuracy. Like I talked about before, if you inflict death or flare, same kind of deal, because it's basically an instant kill, so that kind of makes sense. But when the enemy uses Petrify, it is 100% accurate. It will always hit you, and it will always kill you instantly. In just a few turns, this boss could have your whole party wiped out, and then you gotta go back to the first phase. Out of like 3 potential options to cure stone, I did happen to have one on my white mage. Asuna can do the trick. Unless the spell misses, or he rushes the white mage mid-cast, which he's programmed to do, or if the white mage gets stoned before anyone else. So my solution to winning this fight was basically just trial and error. Keep trying until none of those things happens. That was my only chance. What a misery. It makes me think of my last video when I was talking about Expedition 33's secret super boss. I was gushing about how satisfying it was to keep going back to the drawing board until I came up with a strategy that worked. It wasn't trial and error, it was finding the right solution to the puzzle. This is like if that fight was put in the middle of the game, wasn't optional, and you had to spend an hour fighting other bosses if you wanted to improve your team for it. Where's the fun in all this? It's all just a slog for me. Later in the game, when I did have more to customize, I would go back to the drawing board after a loss, and there would be a few things I could change to help me out, but it would rarely solve my problems entirely. There was one stage where I was being overwhelmed with magic attacks. I had enough JP to get a silencing spell on one of my guys, and this was like the 3rd attempt, so I decided to spend the points. I was saving up for a while to get something else, but this fight really wasn't going well, so I got the silencing spell. Well, I ended up winning that fight without using the spell that I bought. I guess it just happened to weigh in my favor. I got lucky, but now I'm out those points on a character I was trying to save up on. That was around the same time I unlocked the arithmetic job, which seemed interesting. Their gimmick is to hit all units on the map with certain spells regardless of range. But the catch is that they're very slow. That's reasonable in any other game except Tactics. Remember, job training is tied to the actions they perform, and arithmetics aren't just slow, they are the snails of Ivalice. I'm not kidding when I say both the enemy and the rest of my units would take 3 turns before my arithmetic could even start casting a spell. That basically means he was making JP at a 1/3 of a rate of everyone else. I even equipped him with Hermes shoes for innate haste at the start of battle. It didn't help that much, and knowing I was fairly close to the end of the game at this point, I had to just say screw it. I guess I'm not gonna have an arithmetic. I guess I'm not gonna play with that job that sounded fun because the game is just so relentlessly slow. This starts to happen with other jobs too. Chances are you're gonna have 1 or 2 units who are especially strong, your main damage dealers who will get most of the work done. But because they get the most work done, the other units on your team will get less work. They will get less opportunity to gain. I had a ninja on my team. They are very fast and they deal high damage. He got maxed out. I ended up with a major overflow of JP I couldn't use because I had already bought all of the ninja abilities. Meanwhile, my mage classes were begging for scraps because they couldn't contribute to the battle nearly as often as the ninja. And whenever I tried to switch the ninja to a different job so I could actually benefit from the JP gains, I would just lose too much of my damage output. I ended up just keeping him that way for the rest of the game, robbing the rest of my team from potential JP and also not being able to experiment any longer with that character. But at least I was winning battles. It just doesn't feel good though. This is what I'm talking about. If you don't grind, the game is just not for you. It's not that fun. Everything takes too long. When enemies are at a critical HP, they just run away from you to draw out the match. They don't even attack, they just run. Grinding is almost indistinguishable from actually playing the game with real intent for strategy. You spend every battle thinking about training your jobs. Like if one of my units is out of range, I'll very often hit my own teammate just to gain the job points for it. There are so few serious battles where I had to change everyone around and equip only my best jobs to get through. But you can't always sit there and just like smack each other around to gain JP because if a character dies, they have 3 turns before they disappear forever and are permanently gone from your party. And as I said, I hate permadeath because it's not a real mechanic. Some people praise permadeath for giving the game actual stakes, but that's just a lie. Nobody plays permadeath and actually accepts the consequences. Everybody knows that if you play a game with permadeath and you lose a unit that you care about, one that you've trained the whole game for, yeah, you're gonna just turn off the game and reset your last save. Of course you are. No one in their right mind would just be like, oops, spent 30 hours training that guy, guess he's gone now. Well, that's just the consequence. No, nobody does that. It's a pointless mechanic in 2025. Maybe it was cool back in the day, but man, it just means nothing anymore. Maybe it's just my play style, but the way the game is designed feels like it forces me to think this way. Only the bosses tend to have the massive spike in difficulty anyway. And don't call this an easy mode issue because it's the exact same experience I had when I played War of the Lions. Hold up. As I'm writing this, the game was just patched. Game balance for certain battles when playing in Squire mode has been adjusted. Well, what changed? I went to those data miners back on Reddit to find out, and this is what they said. That very fight I was just complaining about was nerfed, and possibly some other difficulty spikes in the game. The enemies have less HP and less SP, so they can't use so many devastating moves in a row. Well, I guess I can't say for sure now just how much more manageable Squire mode is. Some fights might just be a wee bit easier, but yeah, it's probably not that noticeable. But if that makes the difficulty curve a little more comforting to you, there you go. Except, there really is no difficulty curve in the game anyway. It's all just random spikes. The hardest fight in the game could take place right before a fight where you steamroll through the enemy without even a care. It's totally unbalanced. A lot of players agree that Chapter 4 is probably easier to get through than Chapter 3. Chapter 1 can be very hard because you don't have abilities yet, so you don't have a team that could like effectively fight really anybody. You might struggle more with Chapter 1 than any of them. Plus, most fights in the early game are about wiping out the entire enemy team, and it takes a long time to do that. Towards the end of the game, most major boss fights are just about killing one specific target. So if you hone your entire squad on that boss and ignore everyone else, you can probably just outdamage them before they can take you down. Plus, you'll be farther along in your job, so you'll actually have more to experiment with. I'm telling you, that's really what it boils down to, man. That's all it takes. Just grind those jobs. If you can go into this game with all jobs just maxed out, with all abilities at your disposal, yeah, you're just gonna win. There's no difficulty anymore. You just broke the game. You can grind and do that if you want. And I'm pretty sure that's what these people do when they say tactics is easy. Maybe not to that extent, but you know what I mean. There is one piece of advice that is always given when people ask for it before starting their first playthrough. It's easily the most common I've ever seen. It is to level up Squire on every unit until you get enough to pay for JP Boost, the passive ability. Everyone I know does it. You put JP Boost in your passive slot and it increases the amount of JP you get for performing actions. Basically, it just makes grinding go faster. Don't you find it a little concerning when the most common tip is to make grinding go faster? Oh wow, sounds like a fun game I'm gonna be getting into. And the worst part is, they're right. It's basically the objectively most efficient way to play. And if you're like me, you're gonna be spending the entire game reaching for new abilities and new unlockable jobs. So basically, that passive ability slot will never be switched off of JP Boost. Pretty much the entire game, all my classes just had JP Boost because they were always training something. There are some really great passive abilities in this game, and they are usually very expensive, and I will never buy them because I'd rather have the grind go faster. I'm more concerned with getting other abilities that I want before the freaking credits roll. Even when you start a job you're excited to use, usually it takes a few good battles before you can even get a single decent ability for it. For those first starting battles, all you can do is a normal attack or your secondary ability chosen from a previous job, which will be weaker than it was before because you are no longer playing its matching job. I'm just going on at this point. That's really it. That's the one fatal flaw that I think would fix this game for me. Simply make the JP grind go faster, like much faster. All I'm really asking for is for the game to match the way every other RPG ever made works. I can't believe I have to explain this, but in RPGs, it always takes more experience points to get to the next level, right? It's usually an exponential curve. The higher you go, the more it'll take. And this tends to be balanced out by the increased gains found in late game monsters. You kill an early game monster, you get like 2 XP. You kill a monster in the final dungeon, you could get 1,000, depending on the scale of the game. But remember, in Final Fantasy Tactics, progression is not tied to defeating an enemy. You technically don't even need enemies involved in the equation. In fact, we have the actual equation. The amount of JP you gain is determined by this formula: 8 plus twice your job level, plus a quarter of your character level. So technically over time your gains do increase, but at a tremendously low rate. I found out they actually did increase this rate in Ivalice Chronicles. This version graces us with an additional plus 8. Plus f***ing 8. Let's just calculate what one of my characters was making towards the end of the game. 8 plus the extra Ivalice Chronicles 8 equals 16. My job level on the time mage, which I was training at the time, was 4, so double that and add it on, that's another 8. Comes out to 24. Now divide my character level, 21, by 4, that's approximately 5. Add that on, and I was getting 29 JP per action. You wonder why I kept a JP boost equipped the whole time? That ability multiplies your total gains by 1.5, so I was really getting about 43 JP per action, as opposed to the very early game when I was getting around 34. That is the slim difference we're talking about over the course of a whole game. The enemies get way harder, and the points earned do not proportionally scale, because the scale is not tied to how far you are in the game. The amount of points earned only changes based on the character's own progress and has nothing to do with the enemies. Progression happens at the exact same pace regardless of where you are in the game. Grinding out jobs as early as possible is a viable but boring option, because it'll take you just as long. You know that guy who famously got to level 99 in Final Fantasy VII just by farming the first area for like 500 hours? Yeah, only a crazy person would do that. But in Tactics, it's almost encouraged. Like, why not? You'll have to do it anyway if you want to eventually enjoy the game to its fullest, and plenty of people do this. I guess Tactics is just made for crazy people. Designing progression in an RPG like this just goes against everything I value. What is the actual game design philosophy around having it take this long to get anywhere? What, do you want the player to feel like they really earned it? Don't bullshit me, we're getting there through the same boring repetition. I think about Stranger of Paradise. You can grind through jobs so fast in that game, constantly being given a new toy to play with, and it was so much fun. Maybe it was too fast, though I would never say that. That game is like 10 hours shorter than Tactics, but it has more jobs, and you can experience all of them before the end of the game if you want to, without grinding. Saying Tactics should be more like Stranger of Paradise is sure to get some commenters angrier than they already are, but just think about how much more fun it would be if you could access nearly all the job abilities in a reasonable amount of battles. So much actual freedom and ways to customize sooner. How would that not improve the game? Would it be too easy? Okay. Make the challenges more difficult to match it then. Because right now, most of the battles are about you out-damaging them with stronger attacks anyway. Despite its reputation, once you learn all the mechanics, when it comes down to actually strategizing, Final Fantasy Tactics is really not so complex as it is tedious. What makes that infamous boss fight they had to patch so annoying? Well, one is that it's placed in the middle of a chain of battles, and two, you might just be screwed because you chose the wrong abilities to train. But what if you could have way more abilities at that point in the game because they weren't giving you table scraps of JP? Then it would be, how most RPGs are with tough bosses. That would make it a fight that asks you to look at your arsenal and equip yourself with the right tools to win, rather than a fight that just laughs at you because your arsenal is not the right one for it and it's too late to do anything to change that. You could make the whole game as difficult as the Wheagraph fight. I don't care. I would probably like it, just as long as I could solve the puzzle you want me to solve instead of wondering if I even have the pieces. The way people talk about this game, it's as if that's how it works already. They all say their favorite part about it is the amount of cool customization options there are. So many potential builds and combos, it sounds great on paper, but the reality of playing Final Fantasy Tactics is that the majority of your time in it just feels like menial work in hopes of getting there. And when you finally do, the game is basically over. And with this playthrough, I learned that not even playing on Squire mode will change that. Difficulty is not actually the issue. It's the character building itself that's flawed. And that is my big soapbox for the video. I spent the whole game training this same team, resetting whenever one of them died because that's what you do in games with permadeath. And by the end, after my second playthrough of Final Fantasy Tactics, I still was not really satisfied with where they were. Ramza was a Dragoon Samurai. That's kinda cool. And I had a ninja who hit everyone twice and would go invisible when attacked. He was pretty good, but his secondary abilities didn't really synergize or complement with him. They were just there as other options. And my other two guys were mages. And even though I tried training them in other classes like Orator, Summoner, or Mystic, at their best, they were never doing anything more than either white magic, black magic, or time magic for healing, getting some ranged attack in, or making my units faster. They did nothing exciting otherwise. For Summoner, abilities were just so expensive and weren't very worth it. See the Black Mage example from earlier, they basically do the same amounts of damage. And on Mystic and Orator, both had super niche support abilities that I could barely find a use for. For the really difficult endgame fights, I ended up replacing them with guest characters. The guest character situation in this game feels awkward. It feels like a betrayal to use them over your own homegrown custom boys. Especially because they tend to be objectively stronger in most ways, so it's kinda cheating, isn't it? And the sunk cost fallacy rears its head again. Am I really gonna use this character who has a gun instead of the mage I spent the last 20 hours training? Well, eventually I did just say yes to that. Although it wasn't a character with a gun, it was none other than Sid. My memory of Sid in my original playthrough was that he was a hero who absolutely carried my team through the last few fights, which is why I ranked him S tier on my Sid ranking. I wondered if he was really all that great or if my memory made him out to be more useful than he was. Nope. He's the best character in the game. He's still completely overpowered. He literally wields Excalibur. He starts every battle with haste. He murders everyone in like 2 hits with range and 100% accuracy and no cast time. If you call it cheating to use Sid in this game, I can't make up an argument against you. But if the game is gonna let me cheat through what I consider to be a slog, I'm gonna do it. The last quarter of the game felt very similar to how it did the first time around. I had one primary thought in my mind. Can we just get this over with? And there came Sid, descending from the heavens to tell me, yes, we can. Did I learn my lesson? Probably not. I think according to fans, I played it wrong the first time and I likely played it wrong the second time. If you haven't noticed, I don't exactly gel with the way this game's designed. Like at all. I knew it from the second this remaster was announced. It wasn't gonna change my overall thoughts. I could see the disappointment in your eyes 5 months in advance. Did I leave Ivalice Chronicles feeling more positive than I did when I beat War of the Lions? Absolutely, it is absolutely better. But the changes I wanted were far more extreme than the ones we got. They were probably more extreme than the ones fans wanted. I think if you are a fan, this is the best version of this game. You'll probably enjoy it. Except for the missing content, because that's just a thing Square Enix does, I guess. They just forget about stuff they used to add in other versions. It just makes me think I'm crazy, because for a series with so much controversy, so much variety, where everybody has a differing opinion on everything, Tactics is one of those games that seems to just have total positivity. Like there's nothing wrong, and how dare you even imply that there's anything wrong with my precious Tactics. It's just complete overwhelming positivity. This is the greatest game ever made, or at least one of them. The placement I got the second most hate for in my ranking video was Final Fantasy IX. But you know what? For every comment that called me crazy, I felt like there was another saying, yeah, Final Fantasy IX, not my favorite. Yeah, maybe that one's overhyped. Or yeah, 9 is my favorite, though I totally do understand your perspective. But Tactics, man, no one could accept it. It's so weird because a game like this should have a lot of people saying it's not for them. It's hard to understand, it's obtuse, it's demanding, it's old. And I told you my theory before that Tactics is one of those games you can tell is going to be for you just by looking at it, so people who might hate it just never get around to playing it, so there's no one to combat all the positivity out there. And I gotta say, I was one of those people. If I didn't set out on this journey with strict rules to play every single game in the series with no exceptions, I guarantee you I never would have played this game or its sequels. So if you're one of those people too, I'm gonna say your feelings are probably valid. You probably don't need to play this. It's like when they announce a new Fire Emblem game in a Nintendo Direct. I'm just like, oh, no thank you. Tactics Advance and A2 have a lot less of the kind of crap that this original makes you put up with, but those games are also so dull. They still feel so grindy, and they don't have the memorable story and world building to make up for it. That's why those are so much lower on my list, and back to back with each other. I feel pretty much the same way about both of them. Shouts out to the fans of those two games though. I made a joke in the ranking video about how nobody is ride or die for Tactics Advance, and I got several comments from the A1, A2 fan club. I see you guys. I'm sorry for their low placement. The Tactics games are just not for me, apparently. If only we could have known this before I made this video. If only I said this. You know, making a video like this, it's not a good idea. It's only gonna get me hate. It's probably not gonna get me new subscribers, you know? At least when I gave it the number 37 spot, that was just one moment in a 5-hour video that people otherwise seem to have enjoyed. But now I'm just putting a big negative spotlight on it. But that's my opinion, and I gotta live by it. I'm gonna be reading the comments. I'm scared, but I'm gonna read them. So fire away if you must. You know, as scary as it is to make this video, I do feel relieved to finally just dish it all out. Give you everything I have to say about it. And now this time with certainty I can declare I never have to play Final Fantasy Tactics ever again. I don't care what you people want. I don't care if it gets remade again. I'm done, man. You really think I'm gonna love it the third time? It's over. Just, we will all do better if we can just move on. So next time on Refoid... Oh, wow. It's been a while since I said that. There isn't a next time on Refoid right now. We have to wait for the next game. So, but next time on this channel, I think if you're a fan of Refoid, you will enjoy what I have to put out next. Thanks for watching, especially if this video made you really mad and you still stayed to the end. Really appreciate it. See you next time.